If you thought Jules was a kind chef lady with 4 arms, then you were right about everything bar the kind bit. She has a mean streak and likes spice. We have seen a lot of Jules' hot items be revealed. These are items that apply burning, and I'm going to go through all of them so you don't have to. First up is curry, and it's generating heat just off the card art, and the effect mirrors that. Curry is a small item. On an 11-second cooldown, it applies 10 joy and 4 burn. Its passive ability is that it charges 50% faster while the opponent is burning. Before I dive into any of the specifics on this, let me quickly explain 2 things that we're going to see a lot in this video. First of which is joy. This is an effect that only Jules so far can produce, and it's effectively damage, but also not. Joy adds up in increments on a little blue bar that runs alongside your health bar. And if at any point your joy equals or exceeds your remaining health, you lose. So it's kind of like she's dealing damage from the inside out, and she can also deal damage, and if they meet in the middle, she wins. The other thing you'll hear a lot about is burning. Burning is a condition that can be applied, so it's a little different from joy. It's a lot more like poison, freeze, stuff like that. Burning can add up in stacks, and every half a second you will take damage from burning equal to the number of stacks. So if you have 20 burning on you and it ticks over, you will take 20 damage. And then the burning stacks will go down to 19. And then you'll take 19 damage, and they'll go down to 18, and then you'll take 18 damage, so on and so forth until you run out of burning stacks. Unless more burning stacks are applied, of course. So on this, 10 joy is basically 10 damage, and 4 burn is also 10 damage after all of its ticks. So this is 20 damage in 11 seconds, which isn't too bad for a low-cost small item. However, if you are using this as part of any burning build, you should almost always have that passive going. So this is more like an 8.25 second cooldown item, at which point it becomes even better. And that's just at base. That's before you apply any speed bonuses or any other bonuses to advancing or charge speed. So 20 damage basically every 8 seconds on a small item that costs 4 gold. That's actually really, really good. It is strong by itself early and mid, although even better in a burning build. But later on, you'll definitely want to have this as part of a much wider build, or you're probably going to be selling it and looking for some stronger stuff in its place. The beautiful open area grill is the next card on our list, and even though there are some beautiful looking, what look like steaks grilling on there, Reynad did confirm in one of his earlier streams, and by confirm I mean confirm, that all meats in the Bazaar are synthetically grown and not from real animals, even though they taste exactly like the real thing, because this is a made-up fantasy world and he can do what he wants. The grill is a large appliance, and every 9 seconds it will apply 10 burn. And when you use the rightmost item, apply 2 burn. 10 burn every 9 seconds is pretty damn good. It's what you'd expect, though, from a 10 gold large item. If it's not doing something substantial, then it's probably a waste of space. For those of you that don't want to do the maths, this works out at about 55 damage over the 5 seconds while it ticks. While that damage is strong, though, the passive has even greater potential. Rightmost, or leftmost as we can also see, are my favourite sort of keywords to see in abilities at the moment. There are a lot of adjacency bonuses in the Bazaar, so if you're not up to speed with what those mean, adjacency is basically if there is an item to the left or right, exactly left or right of this item, then they get a buff. So say I am an item that gives +1 damage to the item to my right or to adjacent items, then items either side of me exactly will get that buff. However, because you can't really stack adjacency bonuses, that's where things like rightmost or leftmost comes in. Rightmost is the item on the far right side of the board. Now, it does take into account, as far as we know, locked slots. So if you have locked slots on your right-hand side of the board, that's fine. It'll be your rightmost item. So you can stack a adjacency bonus and a rightmost bonus thanks to items like the grill. And it really, really does elevate that sort of single core item build that Jules can actually have access to. If you're able to use an adjacency bonus to make a item on the right charge really, really, really quickly, or just apply more burn, then this thing is going to absolutely pop off. You can even apply dual cast to it, potentially. I'm not saying these are things that you're definitely going to be able to do, but if you can buff that rightmost item so that it triggers more regularly or adds more burning, then Grill is an excellent choice to add on to that. This item will probably be too costly early game, but mid game or late game, pick it up with a quick firing item, shove that in your right slot, and you're going to do just fine. Or, as I already said, you could come up with an entire build based around it and absolutely demolish your opponents. Next up is the Hotbox with lots of different things on offer. The Hotbox is a medium appliance that every 12 seconds heals both players for 10. When you use the left item, burn for 4, and when you use the right item, apply 5 joy. The active is, well, it's okay if you're running a joy build, because it doesn't matter so much if the enemy is at full health, because a lot of the time you're expecting to kill them even if they are full health. However, if you're running a burn build, the passive can kind of get in the way. I do like the mechanic in general though, I will say. I love these sort of almost backwards abilities that are going to benefit both players or maybe even harm you to do a certain thing. I love that sort of risk-reward aspect that the Bazaar does seem to be tackling, so more of that please. You are really buying this item for its passive though, and just like the grill, having that option for a left and right means you can buff 2 different things. Now this doesn't say left and right most, so this is going to be your adjacency type of item. So your item to the right is going to be getting a certain buff, and your item to the left immediately is going to be getting a certain buff, and then you can use items like grill to buff them even more. This is never really going to be the star of the show, but 4 burn or 5 joy, when triggered quite rapidly, can actually deal some significant damage to the enemy. So this is going to be a decent pickup early on, especially if you can combine it with anything that fires quickly. But then as you go through mid-game and into late game, you're possibly going to be swapping this out for either smaller items that you can fit more stuff in, and that specifically help your build, because this is obviously split between 2 different builds, being burn and joy, or you're going to need to upgrade it so we can keep up with those other options. We all played Hot Potato as a kid, right? The game where you have usually not a potato, usually it's like a ball or something, and you're throwing it around saying hot potato and you've got to throw it really quickly. I don't think there were actual rules for this. Anyway, there's one in the Bazaar. The hot potato is a small meal item, and every 8 seconds it applies 8 burn and 1 joy. This then gets -1 burn and +1 joy. Thematically, this is great. This is a huge tick for me. This is what would happen if you threw a hot potato around. It would get cooler as you threw it, so it would be doing less burning damage. But who wants to eat a steaming hot potato? No thank you. So it'll get more joyful, or better to eat, once you've thrown it around a bit and let it cool down. Might get a bit bruised, but hey, that just adds the flavour, right? Mechanically, this might be fun to use, but I could see it becoming annoying. Almost a little bit like the hotbox prior to this. This does burning and joy, and typically your build is going to be pivoting in towards one of them. So if you're doing a joy build, you're really going to be annoyed that this thing isn't triggering fast enough to be dealing more joy damage. Like, you're going to have to try and find ways to dual cast this or add speed to your build so that you can churn through those useless burning ticks and get to some joy application. Equally on the other side, if you're running a burn build, you're not going to care about this item after it's triggered a couple times because it's suddenly doing like pittance amount of burn damage. So it's going to be a really awkward item to fit into your build. That being said, at just a small 4 gold item, you're going to be able to pick it up pretty early on, and it's going to do some consistent damage. 8 burn on the first tick after just 8 seconds, that's a considerable amount of damage. That's getting close to what that large 10 gold item grill was doing. So definitely a really good pickup early, but as you move into middle and late, you might want to find items that better synergize with your build, or maybe if you can upgrade this all the way to fancy, there are some options that help you put it in one direction or the other. Now, so long as you can stop Jules' daughter Laurel playing Doom or Skyrim on her microwave, then it's a pretty useful item for her build. The microwave is a medium appliance, and every 12 seconds it burns for 2 for each item that you own. In the case of the screenshot, they had 4 items, so 8 burn. Your food items charge 25% faster, but have -2 feed, or as it's now known, joy. Now, I specified that this was a good item, but it's a good burn item. It takes items actually like the previously mentioned hot potato and turns it into a much better burning option. It's going to be charging more quickly, it's going to count towards the burning damage the microwave is doing, and you don't want it to be doing that joy damage anyway. You can do the same to curry. In fact, I implore you to grab a microwave and fill it with as many small burning and or joy items and watch it go off. Now, again, you're going to be focusing on the burn here, so don't put a joy only item alongside this. I mean, you can, but it's going to take -2, so it's going to be less effective. But you can get them to all trigger much more quickly, and if you can have burning trigger more quickly, your stacks are going to shoot up through the roof, and suddenly you're doing a lot of damage. Because with burning, the important thing is how many stacks you can get applied before they tick down to 0. Microwave itself can deal a maximum of 18 burn every 12 seconds, so alone it isn't crazy strong. Grill is better, so you do need to make sure you're making use of that passive, which early on in the game, thankfully it counts for its own active ability, so it's going to be doing 2 burning at the very least, but at 9 gold it's quite expensive for what it is, so you're probably looking to pick this up in the mid game, and honestly I think that's the ideal place for it, because you might still have your old sword that you started with, which is a small item that's helping you buff up the microwave and deal extra damage, but you've probably picked up a couple of small items and you have a general idea about what build you want to go into, and this helps you pivot hard into that sort of burning build. But later on, you'll probably set up for something better like Grill. Oven was one of the first sort of pieces of art I saw that's still in the game. There was lots of early art, but this was one of the first pieces that I looked at and thought, that's in the game. That is finished. That is the direction this game is going in, and I love it. It's this beautiful sort of outdoor space for an oven, surrounded by Jules' tools and other bits of food. It's just beautiful. The oven itself is a large item on a 7-second cooldown. It applies 3 burn and advances all your meals by 2 seconds. For a large 12 gold item, this is on a little bit of the weak side, especially for a burn item. Just 3 burn every 7 seconds, that is absolutely pitiful. But we're really just picking this up for the meal advancing. You have to be playing into that if you're going to pick up the oven. This isn't going to be the central item that you build around, it's not going to be your main application of damage. Rather, it's going to be one of your major buffing items, and it might not even lead to a burn build. The burning on this is sort of substantial. You're really picking it up for that cooldown reduction, which you can apply to joy items just as easily, if not more easily, than burn items. Now, you will want to make sure you're pairing this up with a bunch of small meals, because it just gets exponentially better for the extra items that you add onto your board. And obviously, you can fit more small items on a board than large or medium items. Fortunately for Jules, she is able to guaranteed pick up a small food item every day. If you aren't yet aware, at the beginning of each day, every character has a different pair of options, or I think 3 to 4 options in some cases, where they can choose what they want to sort of start the day with. And one of Jules' options, I think she goes and visits Laurel, her daughter, and together they make a midday snack, which is a small food item of which we can use to help trigger this item, of which we can use to great effect thanks to this item and a number of others. This is super expensive for the early game, but mid or late you can pick this up to buff a number of small items, especially if you've been working on some of the other builds we've been talking about so far during this collection, and you wanted to sort of upgrade into something maybe a little bit more quick. The next item is more of an honourable mention, but it definitely does assist with burn builds, and I couldn't really omit it, and that's the oven mitts. The oven mitts are a medium gear item, and every 6 seconds removes 5 burn from yourself. Its passive, however, is that your burn items apply 1 extra. There are some cards in the game that will burn both players. We will see one of them at the end of this collection, so stay tuned for that because that's a really weird item. But oven mitts, at least the active of it, was kind of designed around that. They don't necessarily want to design items that are good at countering your opponent, because you're not really going to know. You're going to be able to pick an opponent. So maybe I'd pick a Jules or a Vanessa if I had oven mitts, because they're more likely to have burning damage. But realistically, this is included to help you counteract the burning damage you might be applying to yourself. But we really are interested in this item for its passive, and that shouldn't really be a shock. Applying 1 extra burn every time you apply burn, that can really get crazy. If you have lots of small burning items that are triggering, maybe not super quickly, but at least there are lots of them churning out. Maybe some of them have dual cast or multicast or whatever. Or you just have a couple of items. They could be small, they could be large, with really short cooldowns. Then oven mitts is the burn item for you. Early game, I feel like this will just eat up a slot. But with the correct build, mid or late game, this is the item that can actually turn the tides and see you really shoot up and take those big win streaks. The newest addition to our collection is the skillet, which was recently revealed by Greg in the official Bazaar Discord. If you aren't already there, he reveals new items every single week, and when he doesn't, someone else typically does. There's a link to that down in the description below. It's right next to the link to our Discord as well, so if you want to join them both, knock yourself out, we'd love to have you. The skillet is a medium appliance item. Every 8 seconds, this item's passive gains +1 burn for the fight. Its passive is when you use an adjacent ingredient or meal item, apply to burn. So we were just talking about quick firing items, I'm pretty sure. And if you put that next to this as well, then you're going to be getting some serious benefits out of this. And if you remember at the very beginning of this collection, we were talking about items like the grill, which use the rightmost items. So for example, you could have the grill at the far left of your build, the skillet in the middle, and a quick firing item in the right that will trigger both of them and apply loads of burning and keep stacking up the passive of skillet. I love how there are multiple ways to achieve one goal with these builds that we've seen in this collection. Like, you could go for a hotbox, or you could go for a grill, and you could be trying to sort of buff the adjacent items or the rightmost items, or you could go for a skillet and try to keep buffing the skillet, get that on a short cooldown, and then use its passive to apply to all of your meals, or you could use the oven and just have your sort of buffing item be subsidiary and all of your other items the main deal, and they're applying lots of burn natively to the card. They're just having a cooldown buff. There are so many different ways you can achieve the same thing, and I think it's going to be really, really healthy for the Bazaar because it gives us two things. First of all, it gives us endless replayability. We can do the same thing, but differently, over and over and over again. The second most important thing is that it means we can actually get a build off the ground. If there were only 5 items, and these 5 items were the way to come up with a build, and there were no alternatives, good or bad, then that build probably isn't going to get run that often. That's going to be a once in a blue moon thing. It's not really the game. However, here we have Jules with burn builds, and she's able to achieve them in a number of different ways at different stages of the game. So you'll guarantee if you're going to pick up a burning item early on, you can probably lean into a burning build. You can't guarantee which items you're going to get, but you can at least have something to focus on for the time being. I think that's really healthy for the game. At just 5 gold, I think this is actually a really strong early pickup as well, especially seeing as it applies to basically everything across your board, seeing as at your Jules. Mid to late game, it has the opportunity to fall off, but it also has the opportunity to keep plowing on. So this is one of the ones that I potentially keep around even just to see what I could do with it. Of course, we had to bring some spice to the collection, so we naturally have the spicy pepper. The spicy pepper is a small ingredient which just has a passive ability. When you use an adjacent item, apply to burn. It has most of the benefits of skillet, minus the fact that it cannot grow any more potent, but with the positive of it being much smaller. It is also an ingredient where skillet is an appliance, so if you have certain items that benefit either of those, then that can help you make the decision. But the likelihood is, as I just mentioned, that you're probably only going to get to see one of these when you're looking for something like this. So it just increases the odds of finding the right type of item you want for your build, even if it's not exactly the one you were after, and you can swap it around later if you happen to find the correct one. Just as with skillet, this can be really strong early game, but you're probably going to need more investment in it to carry it through the mid and later games, although I definitely think it can help those builds. Finally, we have reached the self-burn item that I mentioned previously, and that's the T-Siphon. The T-Siphon, every 11 seconds, will apply 10 speed and 7 burn to both players. I love the theming of this card. You're inviting another person over to drink tea with you, so both players get the buff. As someone who always makes the tea, I can really get behind the theming of this card on that level. However, when it comes to the mechanics of this, unless you have a build that really, really benefits from speed, or that adds extra burning to your opponent, or you happen to have oven mitts, this really won't be doing all that much for you. I will definitely be including this in some of my more meme builds, and I'm glad that there are some more meme-ish items involved in the game. That's important for me, and that's probably important for quite a few people. And speaking of dumb build content, make sure you're subscribed for that, because I have a lot of it planned, and you're actually really going to be interested in some of it. I just know, I can tell. It's good shit. Just stay tuned for it, okay? Hit the button. Now, no matter the stage of the game, Tea Siphon, it's a niche item. So early, middle, late, doesn't really matter when you're going to be picking it up. If you are taking it, it's because you know you can deal with its ability and you have some sort of plan based around it. Last but not least, and that I really mean, because this could be my most favorite item in the collection, and that is the toaster. The toaster is a medium appliance. Every 7 seconds applies 3 burn. Its passive is that adjacent small meal items have dual cast. 3 burn for 7 seconds is alright, of course, but not at all why I would pick up this card. Let's just pretend that it doesn't have an active ability. It has dual cast. I absolutely adore dual cast. Tricast, octocast, dualcast, multicast, all of these are really, really fun keywords to add into the game. It adds a layer of chaos that I just kind of want to have in the games that I play. I want to be able to have those wow moments, be them with or against me. This is one of the more toned down versions, specifying small meals, but it is both items either side of it. And if you apply this to curry, as we've seen, or even something like ice cream or pancakes, then this can really have a massive impact in a fight. Early game, you can get the benefits out of this guaranteed from your one sort of treat you get at the start of every day. But once mid or late game comes around, you're going to want to find specific items to put with this. It is definitely good in those mid to late stages. You just need the right items alongside of it to make use of its broken passive. Jules has a lot of great burn options, but did you know she actually has even more joy options? So many so that I tried counting to see if I would do a burn or a joy build, and, well, I kind of gave up. There are just so many of them. So to take a look at my top 5, you're going to want to check out this next video, because those are the top 5 joy items, and then definitely subscribe and stay tuned for more as I try to go through all of the items in the Bazaar before the launch, just to get you guys up to speed.